Patient stories provide a valuable insight into the challenges faced and the coping strategies employed by people living with CLL. And they can bring comfort and nurture a feeling that you are not alone to those of us living with CLL and our families. However, the views expressed are those of the storyteller and do not reflect the views of CLL support. And CLL support does not have any editorial control over the contents of each patient's story. And we may not necessarily have prior knowledge of the contents of a patient's story. They reflect the lived-in experience of those who choose to share their story, and they are personal to each individual and their circumstances.
Morning. I just want to start by saying what a privilege it is to speak in front of you today, and I look forward to sharing my journey with you. So, brief overview of what I'm going to talk about today is the symptoms that I experienced when I was first diagnosed, the subsequent diagnosis, the watch and wait period, relapse, novel immunotherapies, subsequent remission, and a stem cell transplant, which I had last year. So, going back now quite a while to 2016, when I was 24, coming on 25, I'm 34 now, I started to experience some symptoms in the nasal space. My nose was very blocked. My snoring was becoming a problem in my relationship potentially. And so it was evident that I needed to go and seek some medical attention. 24, 25, not really expecting a cancer or anything like that. I popped to the med centre. They said, yeah, there's something up there. We'll have a look. It transpired after removing the tumour surgically that it was CLL. I didn't know when the surgery happened that it was CLL. It was only afterwards when the biopsy was tested that I found out about that. And so back then, the landscape was very different. I had 12 fractions of radiotherapy to the face, no further symptoms, and achieved a 6-year remission, which was really good fun. And that's where I'll talk a little bit about watch and wait and what I did during that time. So, in that time, I got married. I moved to Cyprus for 2.5 years. I had our son, who's now 4. And I'll talk about why that's important later on in the story, but it's just about my advice on what you should do during watch and wait, and try not to make it watch and worry. So, in 2022, after my 6-year remission, I relapsed, and I was experiencing some symptoms that were much worse than the first time. I had a large lump on my 12th rib. The nasal space was completely blocked again, and my left eye was starting to suffer because the tumour was pushing on the eye, causing double vision. Pretty drastic, which is when I met Dr. Helen Ma, which she's very modest, but I count my blessings for, because she's the reason that I'm stood here today, along with her absolutely amazing team as well. So 3 tumours, and I'm going to show you some scans in a moment and talk about the treatments that I received to try and combat those tumours. It's interesting to note, my tumours were always solid. It was never in the blood, never in the lymph nodes. It was always solid masses that were growing, which is quite strange. Sometimes I wonder whether that's because of my age. The average CLL patient is, what, 70, 60, and I don't really fit into that demographic, but we'll never know, I guess. So this is a scan. I've added an emoji to cover my modesty. I don't think any of you need to see that. And this is in November 24, 2023, 14th of November. And as you can see, there are 3 tumours here, and this one particularly, if you note, it's actually larger than my heart in this image. So it was becoming really problematic, and it was growing really quickly, so we had to get on top of this. So to do that, I started with a BCL2 inhibitor, which was a fixed duration treatment of 12 months. It was working really well. The main problem was the postnasal space, because there's a lot of sensitive stuff in there. I can live with something on my rib, but this was going to start causing problems. I couldn't see properly, for one. So we started for the 12 months. It worked wonderfully. Removed all of the symptoms from the postnasal space, the collarbone. This was still a bit of a problem, but we can live with that. And I was. And Dr. Ma kindly secured an extra 6 months compassionate access on this treatment because it was working so well. And I continued up until the 18-month point. At this point, things started to turn again. Things were growing again. So we went back to the drawing board. And that's when I started a BTK inhibitor, which I'm still on today. And that was where the magic happened. So I'm going to share some more images with you here. There's 5 months between these pictures. And you'll note on the right that there's no tumours whatsoever. We've gone from an absolutely huge tumour on the rib that was really tough to absolutely nothing, which is outstanding. I mean, we couldn't have expected anything better than that. So what did that mean? That meant I was in remission, which was wonderful. But it also posed new questions for me. Because I'm so young, there's a long time between me now and me being elderly. So what are the options for treatment and potentially a cure? And the only real cure at the moment is a stem cell transplant. I remember some really tough discussions with my medical team about stem cell transplant mortality rate, currently on a treatment that's working, which do we go for? And I bit the bullet. I thought, no pain, no gain, let's do it. So I had a stem cell transplant, which was probably about 13, 14 months ago now. And I couldn't have had that transplant if I wasn't in remission. I needed a strong remission for the transplant. So a kind young chap in Germany, his cells were flown over to the Freeman Hospital, and in a rather anticlimactic moment, they were just dropped into me. And I now have his immune system, and I hope to meet him in a year's time when we can. But that was the big red button, I used to call it. I always saw it as being much further down the line than it has been. But I'm glad I did it. I didn't have any regrets. But also, for most CLL patients, it won't be required anymore because the treatments are so good. So I just wanted to give you some advice, and bear in mind everybody's different. But my advice is in a few parts. Watch and wait, or as many of you will call it, watch and worry. Well, I mentioned a few things that I did during watch and wait, and I'm glad I didn't do them whilst worrying, because I'm here now, and the worrying would have been pointless. I was probably anxious, nervous a little bit after the first treatment, but year 1, I thought about it even less. Year 2, even less. And by year 6, I wasn't thinking about CLL at all. And I'm glad about that. I know it's easier said than done. The next one's a weird one. We're very unlucky to have CLL, but we are the luckiest CLL patients that have ever lived. And that's because of the treatment landscape that exists now. Even 10 years ago when I was first diagnosed, these things just didn't exist. You couldn't have them. It would be a watch and wait followed by some pretty harsh chemotherapy or other type of pretty rough treatment. Well, now your safety net is a massive handful of really effective, decent medications that you can take tablets in the morning and the evening and almost forget about. And that's in the last 10 years. So what's the next 10 going to bring? I've got an analogy about being hit by a bus that I like to think about sometimes. So people that get hit by buses don't spend the 40 years running up to being hit by a bus thinking about being hit by a bus. They don't worry about it. It just happens. You can do exactly the same with CLL. 40, 50 years isn't a crazy place to be when thinking about how long you can live with CLL. So if you can, park the CLL during watch and wait and understand that you've got some excellent treatments that are relatively side effect free, and they're waiting for you. So just let them wait there and you enjoy your life. So finally, just to close then, I just wanted to say you're not alone, and today proves that, and you have more options than ever. Thank you very much.